The story is just beginning. Hope you are still on your chair. Now get a chilled drink as we look into the final part. Rodney Howard-Browne's intervention wasn't just a casual opinion. It was a thunderclap of conviction delivered with spiritual authority. Like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for the full story as it unfolds. His visit to Daystar in February 2023 wasn't a social call. It was a mission. Witnesses described an atmosphere charged with spiritual intensity. The presence of God was so strong, people were reportedly affected physically. In this context, Howard-Browne delivered his message with unequivocal clarity. He labeled the impending marriage between Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss as morally and spiritually wrong. His declaration that Joanie would be living in sin if she proceeded wasn't a gentle warning. It was a stark pronouncement based on his interpretation of Scripture and his understanding of the circumstances surrounding Doug's divorce. He didn't just express disapproval, he drew a line in the sand, stating unequivocally that he would not associate with Daystar as long as Weiss was married to Joanie. This was a significant stance from a prominent evangelist, effectively severing ties with a major Christian network over this relationship. Furthermore, Howard-Browne added a deeply personal and disturbing layer. He revealed that Marcus Lamb himself had confided in him about the negative experience the Lambs had with Doug Weiss during their own marital counseling after Marcus's affair. Howard-Browne described how Weiss had put Marcus through the proverbial ringer. This insider knowledge profoundly disturbed Joanie's children, as it painted Weiss not just as a questionable suitor, but as someone who had caused their father significant distress and who now held sensitive, potentially damaging information about their parents' past struggles. Howard-Browne's stance, rooted in spiritual conviction and personal knowledge, represented the most potent and alarming warning Joanie received, making her decision to proceed all the more inexplicable and damaging to many observers. The heart-wrenching counter-narrative to Doug Weiss's abandonment claim is the persistent testimony depicting Lisa Weiss not as a deserter, but as a devastated spouse fighting to keep her marriage alive. Denise Boggs' account is pivotal. Lisa was actively begging him to stay and not leave her. This image, a wife of over 30 years, described by Doug himself in other contexts as a faithful good wife and great mother, pleading with her husband not to abandon their life together, completely shatters the abandonment justification. It transforms Doug's departure from a response to being wronged into a willful act of leaving a committed, pleading partner. This raises fundamental questions about Doug's true motivations. If Lisa was faithful, a good mother, and actively begging for reconciliation, as reported, what compelling biblical or moral reason could justify Doug's refusal to work on the marriage? The speed with which he moved on to Joni Lamb inevitably colors perceptions. It suggests his commitment to his existing marriage had already dissolved long before the legal divorce, and that his desire for a new relationship overrode any willingness to salvage the old one. This stark contrast, Lisa's desperate pleas versus Doug's resolute departure and rapid remarriage, forms the emotional core of the scandal for many. It portrays Doug not as a victim of abandonment, but as the active agent of marital destruction, undermining his credibility as a marriage counselor and exposing a profound hypocrisy. His actions spoke far louder than his later justifications. Pastor Jimmy Evans, a respected figure in marital ministry, founder of Marriage Today, played a critical and controversial role by stepping in to mentor and guide Doug Weiss and Joni Lamb through their relationship and into marriage. However, his involvement is heavily criticized for a glaring omission. He reportedly failed to conduct basic due diligence. Evans accepted Doug Weiss's claim of abandonment by Lisa as grounds for divorce without apparently ever speaking to Lisa Weiss herself. This is a critical failure in pastoral responsibility, especially given the gravity of the situation, endorsing a new marriage based on the dissolution of a previous one. A shepherd concerned with truth and reconciliation would seek to understand both sides of a broken marriage, particularly when counseling one party into a new union. By not contacting Lisa, Evans deprived himself of crucial information that directly contradicted Doug's narrative, i.e., Lisa's reported pleas to save the marriage. Instead, he relied solely on Doug's account, effectively giving ecclesiastical cover to a potentially false justification. This lack of investigation raises serious questions about Evans's judgment and the robustness of his guidance. Did he feel pressured by the prominence of the Daystar platform? Was there a rush to legitimize the relationship? By not seeking Lisa's perspective, Evans inadvertently became complicit in perpetuating what many saw as Doug's deceptive narrative. His acceptance of the abandonment claim, without verification, became a key piece in the facade that allowed the Weiss-Lamb marriage to proceed with a veneer of spiritual legitimacy, further damaging trust in leadership. The scandal didn't unfold in a corner. It sent shockwaves through the evangelical community that supports Daystar. The concerns weren't limited to Joanie's family or Pastor Howard Brown. Reports indicate that many pastors privately called Daystar, expressing deep unease about the relationship and Doug Weiss's suitability as a partner for Joanie. More significantly, a substantial portion of Daystar's core audience, the viewers and supporters who fueled the network's ministry, were also deeply troubled. They questioned the validity of Doug's divorce reasoning and the wisdom of Joanie's decision. The perception of deception surrounding Doug's secret divorce and rapid remarriage, coupled with the dismissal of loving warnings, eroded trust. The fallout extended beyond mere disapproval. Sources suggested that a vast majority of pastors, like 95%, adopted a stance of silent rejection. "I just don't want to be involved with them." This wasn't active condemnation, it was a withdrawal of association and support, a quiet but powerful form of ecclesiastical censure. They refused to lend their credibility to the network while this situation remained unresolved. This silent majority spoke volumes. It indicated a broad consensus within the pastoral community that something was profoundly wrong, that the narrative didn't add up, and that associating with Daystar under these circumstances could damage their own ministries. This widespread doubt and withdrawal of support represented a significant crisis for Daystar, threatening its standing as a trusted voice in the evangelical world and isolating it from many of its natural allies. Piecing together the timeline, the actions, and the conflicting testimonies reveals a pattern disturbingly inconsistent with transparency and integrity. The core elements, the year-long concealment of the divorce while counseling others on marriage, the sudden announcement of that divorce only days before Joanie's engagement, the dismissal of heartfelt warnings from family and respected spiritual leaders, the questionable abandonment claim directly contradicted by Lisa's reported pleas, the lack of pastoral verification by Jimmy Evans, and the rapid progression of the new relationship while Joanie was still in early grief, collectively point to something far messier than a simple love story. They suggest manipulation. It appears Doug Weiss carefully controlled the release of information about his divorce to coincide with his new relationship plans, minimizing the window for scrutiny. The abandonment justification seems like a manufactured theological shield, deployed after the fact. The consistent theme from those sounding the alarm was confusion and a sense that the official story didn't align with the facts they knew. The narrative promoted by Doug and Joanie, of a God-blessed union emerging from loss, simply collapses under the weight of these documented inconsistencies and the ethical breaches involved. What emerges instead is a picture of deception, a disregard for accountability, and the prioritization of personal desire over professional ethics, pastoral wisdom, and even familial bonds. The scandal isn't just about remarriage. It's about the systematic erosion of trust through actions that appear calculated and narratives that fail to withstand examination. The Daystar scandal is far more than a salacious tabloid story. It's a profound crisis of trust that cuts to the core of faith-based leadership and the delicate relationship between ministers and those they serve. The fallout from Doug Weiss's concealed divorce and rapid remarriage to Joni Lamb isn't fading. It lingers like a stain, forcing uncomfortable questions about integrity, accountability, and the mechanisms that allow such situations to unfold within powerful religious institutions. At its heart, this scandal is a devastating betrayal of trust. Doug Weiss, as a marriage counselor, occupied a position of immense vulnerability. Couples came to him broken, seeking hope and tools to rebuild their most sacred relationship. For him to dispense that advice while actively hiding the collapse of his own 3-decade marriage is an ethical violation of the highest order. It weaponized the trust placed in him. Clients weren't just misled, they were exploited. They paid for wisdom rooted in an experience Weiss no longer possessed, potentially receiving counsel colored by his own disillusionment or justifications, all while believing they were learning from someone who practiced what he preached. This advice on marital fidelity hold weight from a man who concealed his own divorce? How can teachings on transparency be credible from someone who practiced secrecy? The damage extends beyond those specific clients. It erodes confidence in the entire profession of faith-based counseling. Joni Lamb's role, while perhaps stemming from grief and vulnerability, is inextricably linked to this betrayal. Her decision to engage in, and then rapidly formalize, a relationship with Weiss, a man whose professional conduct was already deeply suspect, while ignoring impassioned warnings from her own children and respected spiritual authorities like Rodney Howard-Browne, represents a catastrophic failure of discernment at the helm of a major Christian network. Howard-Browne's warning wasn't mild disapproval. It was a prophetic declaration grounded in conviction and personal knowledge of Weiss's difficult history with her late husband. To dismiss this, along with her children's fears, signals a prioritization of personal desire over spiritual counsel and familial bonds. The breathtaking speed of the engagement, mere days after Weiss's divorce announcement and barely over a year after Marcus Lamb's death, further fueled perceptions of impropriety and disrespect for the grieving process. Her position as a ministry leader amplified this failure, turning a personal decision into a public referendum on Daystar's spiritual integrity. The manufactured justification of abandonment stands as one of the scandal's most cynical elements. Doug Weiss's claim that Lisa abandoned him crumbles completely against the testimony of Denise Boggs and others depicting Lisa desperately begging him to stay. This wasn't theological nuance, it was a calculated misrepresentation, a convenient label slapped onto a situation where Weiss himself was the driving force behind the divorce. It was a narrative designed to provide biblical cover. The subsequent failure of Pastor Jimmy Evans to verify this claim, to even speak with Lisa Weiss, represents a profound abdication of pastoral responsibility. Evans, by accepting Weiss's account uncritically, lent unwarranted legitimacy to this false narrative and became complicit in the facade. His lack of due diligence highlights a dangerous tendency within some religious circles to prioritize institutional harmony or powerful figures over rigorous truth-seeking and care for the marginalized. In this case, the divorced spouse whose voice was silenced. The scandal exposes critical systemic failures. How could a man undergoing a bitter divorce continue counseling others on marriage without oversight? Where were the accountability structures within Weiss's own organization or the broader networks he operated in? The near-universal silent rejection by other pastors, 95% don't want to be involved, speaks volumes about the perceived toxicity of the situation, but it also reflects a failure of collective courage. Silence, while perhaps intended as disapproval, often functions as passive enabling. The lack of robust, transparent mechanisms within ministries to address ethical failures among leadership creates an environment where deception can fester and narratives can be controlled. Daystar, as the platform amplifying both Weiss's counseling ministry and Joni Lamb's leadership, bears significant responsibility for the reputational damage and the crisis of trust among its viewers. The network became the stage for this scandal, and its handling, or perceived lack thereof, has consequences for its credibility and mission. The lasting impact is multifaceted. For Lisa Weiss, it's a private agony made public, the pain of a failed marriage compounded by public misrepresentation and the spectacle of her ex-husband's rapid remarriage to a prominent figure. For Joni Lamb's children, it's the trauma of losing their father followed by the alienation of seeing their mother dismiss their concerns and align with a man whose past actions caused their father distress. For the clients Weiss deceived, it's a violation that may cause lasting damage and distrust. For the evangelical community at large, it's another bruising episode that fuels cynicism, makes it harder to speak with moral authority, and damages the witness of the church. It reinforces harmful stereotypes about hypocrisy and lack of accountability among religious leaders. The Daystar scandal is a stark, painful lesson. It underscores the non-negotiable necessity of radical transparency, especially for those in positions of spiritual authority and trust. Secrets, particularly those involving significant personal failure while ministering to others, are corrosive and ultimately unsustainable. It highlights the critical importance of listening to wise counsel, especially when it comes from loving family and those with the courage to speak hard truths grounded in conviction. Ignoring such warnings, particularly under the guise of personal choice, can lead to disastrous public and private consequences. It reveals the danger of uncritically accepting narratives, especially from powerful figures, and the absolute necessity of pastoral diligence and care for all parties involved in a conflict. Most importantly, it screams the need for robust accountability structures within religious organizations, systems that can identify ethical breaches, protect the vulnerable, and prevent individuals from exploiting positions of trust. The echoes of this scandal will reverberate for years. Rebuilding trust, for Doug Weiss, Joni Lamb, Daystar, and the broader evangelical community, will require far more than time. It demands genuine, demonstrable repentance where wrongdoing occurred, a commitment to radical transparency moving forward, the implementation of tangible accountability measures, and a humility that acknowledges the deep wounds inflicted. The faithful, and the watching world, deserve nothing less. The integrity of the message depends entirely on the integrity of the messengers. This scandal serves as a grim reminder of what happens when that integrity fails. If this deep dive into accountability resonated with you, like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll keep uncovering the stories that demand to be told.